This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
What do you guys want to talk about?
Well, it's Monday. At least by the time you're seeing this, it's Monday. I'm operating under a different timeline at the moment. It's Sunday for me, as I'm recording this. But whether it's Sunday or Monday, in preparation for the weekly FSWR podcast, I'm doing the Lord's work with these reviews. At least I'd like to think I am. Surely when it comes to Retro Raw, I'm doing the Lord's work. Because ain't nobody want to talk about those shows in great detail. Unless you're crazy. Or for whatever reason, you have a strange fixation with bad WWF comedy from the early to mid-90s. Before we dive into that cesspool, let me take a minute to welcome people aboard to the channel. If you're new, subscribe. If you're old, subscribe. If you have a pulse, subscribe. And while you're at it, make sure you like the show, leave a comment, do me a solid, and help the channel where you can. I'm always appreciative of the people that come back to support the show every week and watch me tear through the archives of classic and modern wrestling. The good, the bad, or indifferent. There's a lot of indifference when it comes to modern wrestling especially. Let me tell you. Now today, we've got the usual rundown of Retro Raw, Retro NXT, and Friday Night SmackDown. I've also been dealing with this nagging fruit fly that's been hanging about in the recording studio for like 8 weeks. You know, at some point I would like to figure this thing's either going to die or eat itself into obscurity. It's just pissing me off because it's constantly flying in front of my face. Probably doesn't help that I have a cup of coffee sitting next to me. I know flies are attracted to strong scents. Maybe I need to break out the tumbler again just to seal the top of it off. You know, trap any fumes from escaping. Or, you know, maybe I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and be pissed off. One or the other. We'll see. Actually, I think I'm more so pre-planning my anger for the upcoming Retro Raw show. The fruit fly is expediting the process. Shall we? Shall we get into the fun? The glories and wonders of mid-90s WWF? All right, let's do it. Enough stalling. Let's talk about this absolutely foul show. This fucking Retro Raw. I'm already sweating profusely. It's like watching those old Nitros all over again from the late 90s and early 2000s. Where every single week, it's a constant reminder, can this show possibly get any worse? And they somehow managed to outdo themselves. Just when you thought, damn, that was the worst show I've ever seen. Then the next week happens, and it's somehow significantly worse. That's basically where I am with Retro Raw. And the ironic thing is, we were robbed of the first 5 minutes of the show, more or less. the advertised Yokozuna-Razor Ramon IC title match, even with them intentionally omitting material from these old shows, they still suck. Now let me backpedal for a second. For anybody wondering what the hell I'm talking about here, I'm not lying. When I say we were robbed of the first 5 minutes of the show, apparently they just decided to completely cut out the beginning portion from the tape library. I don't know if the footage went missing, if they found something gravely offensive in it and they just said, we can't air this. But yeah, the entire first 5 minutes of Retro Raw just shaved off from the timeline on the Peacock stream. There's no way to obtain it. The footage is just gone. And if you don't believe me, if you have the subscription, go to the Raw archive, or the Raw archive, I can't say it, the Raw archives, click on the October 24th, 94 edition of Raw, and the first thing you see from the footage is them coming back from the first commercial break where Yoko's getting the heat on Razor. We missed the entire opening montage, any potential babyface flurry that Razor may have had before the commercial break. I have no explanation. I don't know if something happened in the original cut to where they had to take it out. Again, if the footage just went missing entirely. But we basically start Retro Raw with Yokozuna in control of Razor mid-match. Now, hypothetically, yeah, I could probably go hunt down the footage on YouTube somewhere, but fuck it, I'm not that passionate about these Retro Raws. That's not even to say what we saw of the match was any good. Because for the action we did see, fuck was it horrible. All leading to one of the worst finishes I think I've seen on these shows yet, which I will cover in a second. So Yoko's getting the heat on Razor. It's painfully slow and mundane. Yoko legitimately can't do anything physically anymore. And right as Razor's starting to make the comeback, he's standing there throwing punches to the staggering Yoko. Meanwhile, off camera, in the background, keep in mind, we the audience don't see this happening at the time, but Vince is calling it at the booth. There's a casket magically making its way down the aisleway, unaccompanied. There's no Taker. There's no Paul Bear. Nobody is physically rolling this car or this casket down the aisleway. It is a phantom casket slowly edging its way toward ringside. And the payoff is Yoko finally taking a bump out to the floor, at which point he slowly backs up toward the coffin and he does the dramatic reach around, only to then realize, fuck, there's a giant casket here. And like a Scooby-Doo cartoon, Yoko takes off running for the hills, cowering in fear, leading to Razor winning via count-out. The only thing missing from the equation was Yoko doing the run-in-place animation before scampering off and leaving a giant cloud of dust behind him. This, I wrote down, was complete and utter bullshit. I also jotted as a side note, I completely forgot that Razor Ramon was still the Intercontinental Champion. It didn't even register to me going in that Razor was the defending champion. He's been a total afterthought on this show for the last 6 months. Ever since the ladder match with Shawn at WrestleMania, Razor is the epitome of a dude on this show. Razor Ramon. Scott Hall. He's a guy. Unreal. So 5 minutes in, I was already over the show, and I'll tell you what I was not in the mood for after seeing that atrocious finish to the opening match was a Todd Pettingill Survivor Series card update. I took one look at Todd on camera and said, nope, fuck this. I can't do it. So I fast-forwarded. Probably should have kept fast-forwarding when I realized the second match was a smoking gun squash. Thankfully, it was short. Bad, but short. I don't even know who they wrestled here. I didn't even write it down. The one guy I think was Mike Bell. We've seen him as a recurring job guy before. The other one I didn't recognize at all. I don't even think he tagged in. Billy and Barb beat they beat up Mike for a minute and then won with their double team leg drop backbreaker combo. You know, the one thing that stood out to me while watching this match, Billy Gunn in the year 2023 looks more visually impressive than he ever did almost 30 years prior on WWF TV. Not only does he have a better body with a trimmed down V-taper and muscle mass, but even facially, God, when he shaved that hideous mustache and got rid of the god-ugly mullet, it's like, holy cow, this guy actually looks like somebody. He's a good-looking dude. All it took was them dropping this horrendous cowboy gimmick. About 3 years past the expiration date, but, well, you know what they say. Better late than never. It was probably too late for Tatanka by this point in his career. I don't think there was ever a recovery period for that guy. Once the undefeated streak was dropped, it was one steady decline. He had a match with Scott Taylor this week. The future Scotty Too Hottie for all you Attitude Era fanatics out there. I'll just kind of read you my general summation of everything that happened here, since I really don't have anything productive to say about the match beyond what I wrote down. Boring squash. I yawned about 46 times. Tatanka won with the Samoan drop. And then he promised that he would beat up Luger some more. In a feud that has now seemingly gone on for 8 months and not a single fuck was ever given by the crowd. Even though realistically the feud's only been going on for probably 2. I should add, part of Todd's Survivor Series card update was informing us that there will be a big featured elimination tag match on that show. Well, a couple of them, because this is back when WWF actually used the Survivor Series gimmick to its advantage. But one of those multi-man matches was going to be the $1 Million Corporation versus, I think the team was called Guts and Glory, which I vaguely remember being a thing. I cannot recall all the teammates off the top of my head without looking it up. But I do remember Luger was on that team. More than likely the team captain. If that was even a thing they were doing, I don't even know. It's just a lot of the same stuff, though, when it comes to our ongoing Luger discussions here in 94. He's just waiting out the remainder of his contract for another year. I mean, he's mentally checked out. That's totally obvious. He's just there to pick up a paycheck, and that's about it. I don't blame him. I really don't. God, this segment. Okay, I'm just going to read you directly what I wrote down word for word here. I don't think anything else needs to be said. This is a pre-tape, by the way. IRS berates an anonymous dead body outside a funeral home for not paying his taxes. That is all. Nothing else needs to be said. Nor does anything really need to be said about Adam Bomb versus Phil Apollo. It sucked. Vince spent the entire match plugging John Candy tribute shows and SNL. And Adam Bomb went over with a pump handle slam. At which point, for ostensibly no reason that I can think of, Bob Backlund then hit the ring to attack Adam Bomb and choke him out with the crossface chicken wing. I was mostly shocked I got through that recap without accidentally referring to him as Wrath. I mean, they were both terrible gimmicks. I just remember Wrath being more over in WCW than Adam Bomb ever was in the WWF. It's the same thing I talk about when it comes to a lot of guys who had multiple gimmick repackages during their careers. The Brutus Beefcake effect. If you can name all 7 of his gimmicks offhand, you deserve an award. Now let's see if I can do it. You got the Booty Man, the Zodiac, Brother Broody. Oh, God. What was his NWO name? I always forget. Was it the Disciple? Hogan's Disciple? Did he even have a name? I never remember. They all sucked. Just trying to keep track of all of them is the fun part. Ed Leslie. Yeah. So what else do we have on this abomination? Oh, fuck. I forgot about this piece of shit segment. The King's Court with Jerry Lawler and the Midgets. Yeah. Well, it is official. I am now convinced every single solitary one of these segments with Lawler, Queasy, Sleazy, and Cheesy versus Doink, Dink, Wink, and Pink, they are all collectively more insufferable than any bad segment I've ever seen on AEW with the Best Friends. Easily. It is not even close. I will actually go on record right now by saying I will gladly take a company mascot and Chuckle Fuck Taylor tag match in AEW before I ever submerge myself in this Doink Lawler feud ever again. When we get done reviewing this match of Survivor Series, that is curtains. We are memory holing that shit. We will never speak of it again. My God. You know, at least with Cassidy and Taylor, there are probably things that I can find remotely enjoyable when it comes to mocking how terrible those guys are as pro wrestlers. Ain't nothing remotely enjoyable about mocking this shit. This is just bad. Turn the channel heat bad. So bad that even Lawler couldn't save it. The jokes are terribly unfunny. Nobody gives a fuck about these skits. Even the hardcore WWF crowd. Nobody in the audience is reacting to this shit. God bless Lawler for trying, man. But there's only so much torture the human body can take. And they've about reached that breaking point when it comes to this Doink Lawler stuff. Keep in mind, this feud has been going on for over a year. They actually pumped the brakes on this program at one point. They teased this in '93. We didn't even get a payoff. This is the payoff. Over a year later. My God. I can't even bring myself to recapping what happened here. I was just counting down the clock, waiting for it to mercifully end. Trust me when I tell you, there was plenty of bad comedy humor to go around. Like I said, I'm already handcuffing myself into having to review that Survivor Series match. That's enough torture to last a lifetime. So I'm just going to move on with this Diesel match. Whoever this jabroni was he wrestled. Ben Jordan? Whatever. It was every slow plotting Diesel match you've ever seen. It was power move, walk, power move, hair flip, power move, walk, jackknife, pinfall. If I missed any detail, somebody can admonish me in the comment section and let me know. That was followed with more WWF satire as they poke fun at the MLB strike again. It was actually the same footage they used when they showed the Macho Man on that dirt mound the other week. I mean, it's literally the exact same pre-tape. Now they're just beating a dead horse by running the joke into the ground. We get it. WWF doesn't do off-seasons. It was funny the first time. Now it's just old and tiresome. Kind of like this show looking back. Old and tiresome. And this fucking fruit fly is pissing me off. God damn it. Does anybody have a solution to getting rid of flies like that? What are those little sticky things that you can hang up on walls and flies will just kind of run into them and die on the spot? I had to get me one of those. Where would I hang it? Anyway, we done talking about this show. You know what? I'll give them this. They are really trying to make this Survivor Series show spectacular. And meanwhile, these Raws just gradually get worse and worse and more unwatchable with each passing week. And you actually think, what's the big draw right now with WWF in the fall of '94? Well, I think a lot of people would say Backlund versus Brett for the WWF title. Okay. Are they doing anything to hype that feud on TV? Why the fuck is Bob Backlund wrestling Lex Luger next week? What does that have to do with anything pertaining to the Brett feud? Meanwhile, Luger's still doing the cross feud with the corporation, which is all kinds of horrible. The Doink Lawler thing is beyond wretched. Diesel's about to get the monster push of the decade headed into the new year. And again, I'm having to constantly remind myself, yeah, Tommy, and you think it's bad now. Just wait, dude. You are in for a hell of a roller coaster ride in the next year. At this point, it's a test. A test to see, can we actively book the worst wrestling show of all time? And just remember this. These shows are still only an hour. Think about the dying days of Nitro, when this shit was 3 hours every week. And it was arguably worse than this crap. And yet you'll still have marks out there that say, oh, the Attitude Era days. Yeah, we long for those days in wrestling. Back when this shit was good. You kidding me? Dude, the 90s sucked. Anyway, with that, are we ready to layeth the smacketh down? I'm ready to layeth my head on a fucking pillow. That's what I'm ready to do. I had 4 cups of coffee before sitting down to watch this thing. And I still almost fell asleep at the top of hour 2. I also didn't get home until almost 5:15 on Saturday, which is way late for me. So, suffice it to say, I was not in a bubbly mood when I sat down to watch this program. But where are we with SmackDown these days? I watch this show every week, and then I go into it thinking, what the hell did I just watch the week prior? I just never retain any information with this show, unless it's bloodline related. Now, I think we covered the main story on last week's show. My thoughts on the whole Roman Reigns LA Knight title match for Crown Jewel. If you want my elaborated thoughts on it, just go check out last week's report. I tried to be as thorough as I could. To give you the brief summary of it, I have some reservations about it. Mostly because I'm thinking about the long-term ramifications, the reality of what happens when LA Knight loses. But I'm not going to do a rabbit hole deep dive on that subject again. We'll save that incoming tangent for a later date. 2 weeks, precisely, because that show's coming up. Now, we did get LA Knight in the opening segment this week, so I guess we can start with running down that whole confrontation with him and Paul E. Actually, getting a little ahead of myself here, let's do some housekeeping. Apparently, Jimmy Uso cost Cody and Jay the tag straps on Raw this past week. Yeah. So much for my what-if hypothetical of Jay being the one to swerve Cody and then realign with the bloodline. Well, that option's been flushed down the shitter. Unless I have something else in mind. That was our ample opportunity to do it. I have no idea why they decided to randomly flip-flop the belts back onto the Judgment Day, but what's done is done. I guess that means Cody and Jay are exclusive to Raw again until further notice. Which is a bummer, because I kind of like the idea of seeing those guys work a title program on SmackDown occasionally. Hashtag WWE ruins everything. But when it comes to the whole Reigns Knight title match, well, first off, it's official. They threw the graphic up for it. And while Heyman's letting everybody know what the future holds for Mr. Knight, of which he lets us know he is a huge fan, out comes the cold, handsome devil himself, and he tries to see if Paulie has the balls to talk trash in front of his face. And it goes about as you would expect. Heyman cowers in fear. LA Knight tries to intimidate him and get him to send a message to his boy Roman. If he's too afraid to come out and talk to LA Knight face to face, then he can be the messenger. He wants Roman to know that as fast as he's climbed the mountain to get to where he is now, it's going to be that much quicker when LA Knight beats Roman to become the new, undisputed Universal Champion. I don't think I'm leaving anything out. That was the extent of his delivery. I'm the fastest rising star in SmackDown history. Therefore, I am going to be the new world champion that much faster. It's rather strange logic, but it works because it's LA Knight, and the people are totally behind the guy. I will say this, and maybe it's a subtle nitpick on my part, because I like LA Knight. His babyface promos are not resonating with me. And I think I talked about this before. Is this the first time in any mainstream capacity we've seen LA Knight be a babyface? Because I've seen a lot of his work over the years, and most of the time I've seen him, he's been a heel. Whether it was the NWA work, Impact when he was there. I don't think I've ever seen babyface LA Knight before. I think this is new territory he's trying to explore, and he hasn't really quite found his footing yet. Like, he's trying. He's developing the personality. I don't think he's comfortable speaking as a babyface on TV, though. Am I the only one that thinks that? Like, he's trying to go out there and get his message across, and sometimes it just doesn't hit home. He stumbles over himself. He loses his train of thought. It just doesn't seem natural yet. That's not to say he can't grow into that role eventually once he gets more comfortable at it, but what would you call this? A growing pain stage. He's doing the work. He's getting there. I just don't think he's quite reached his peak potential yet. Because heel LA Knight on the microphone, like, that guy was fire. Babyface LA Knight on the microphone, it's not the same. There's a few missing pieces to the puzzle that he hasn't quite figured out yet. But again, you let me know if I'm just picking at grasping for straws or whatever the fucking catchphrase is. I don't know. I'm being too critical. But, again, I shared what I thought of the match, or what I think of the upcoming match. I've shared whether or not I think they ought to be exploring this feud right now, if the end goal is anything but putting the strap on Knight. Again, considering that option doesn't seem likely at this point, I'm just going to leave it at that and say, we'll see what the end result is. Maybe they'll surprise me. For this segment, what they did was effective. Knight continues to get more and more popular with each passing week. He's one of the more over guys they have on either brand right now, be it Raw or SmackDown. I think having Paul in the middle ground to cover up for the fact that Roman's not there is actually kind of good. It's one of those things where, in an ideal world, if I actually bought for a minute that they would be smart enough to put the strap on LA Knight at Crown Jewel, I'd probably be more stoked about this feud than I am at the moment. Unfortunately, I know the way WWE books. And this whole thing has major disappointment written all over it. Even if the match tears the house down, if the end result is LA Knight getting his shoulders pinned in any capacity, I think it's going to backfire on this company. I really do. We've seen this story plenty of times over the years. I'm just kind of expecting LA Knight to receive the same treatment. Because they've already got it planned in their minds that Cody Rhodes is the end goal in all this, all it does is make LA Knight a pawn in the chess game. I think the problem is WWE merely sees LA Knight as just that, a pawn, when the reality is, to the fans, he's more like a bishop or a king. They ought to be protecting this guy. They ought to be making sure he doesn't do jobs. And if they're robbed of that crowning achievement, no pun intended, if LA Knight doesn't win his first major world title at Crown Jewel on a big stage overseas like that, how is that going to translate down the road? Be it in the States or anywhere internationally. Because this guy isn't just popular over here in the States. It's worldwide, brother. Like, this dude is hot. And when he shows up at Crown Jewel for that title match with Roman, expect this crowd reaction and twice that. But again, I just think they need to be concerned about the booking here. The hostile WWE crowd that rejects the idea of LA Knight not being the guy. Whether or not it's right. Whether or not it's the game plan. Just something to think about. But before I wind up doing another 30-minute rant about the LA Knight booking, why don't we spend approximately an eighth of that time talking about Santos Escobar versus Montez Ford? This won't take long. They had a match. It was hardly memorable. Montez has a really nice looking dropkick. Whatever that reverse bulldog thing he did, he needs to retire that move immediately. That looked more indie than anything I've ever seen on AEW TV. Escobar made a comeback following a suicide tope out to the floor. Then he and Ford spent about an hour trying to set up a really dangerous Hurricane Rana spot, a move that also needs to be retired immediately. And then a bunch of shit happened on the floor at ringside so Escobar could then get rolled up and pinned via tight grab. Oh yeah, and Carlito ran out with a chair and then sent the heels powdering. Does anybody know what that new music is they gave him? Why did they change his original tune? Wasn't that like the only thing that actually got Carlito over in the first place like 20 years ago? Now they just randomly decide, after he had been gone for all that time, let's change his music. That's what he needs. I don't know. I still don't have much of an opinion on the LWO, Lashley Street Profits stuff. I mean, at this point, they're just doing every possible combination of pitting these guys together in matches. The epitome of lazy WWE booking. Like, I don't even know if we've established why these guys are mad at each other. Now we're already cycling through every possible match combination to the point where nobody can possibly care. They're just going to beat this program into the ground. But hey, at least Carlito's back full-time. Because that's the one thing WWE needs to resurge life back into their product. Let's rehire Carlito. That'll move the needle. You know what's not moving the needle is Pretty Dreadly in spa sessions. If there's one thing I never need to see, in addition to the suspect sissies in their feminine outfits, It's their exposed feet. I nearly lost my appetite in fast forwarding through that shit. Fucking vile. And seriously, somebody in production thinks this shit is good. They say, let's put this on TV. That this is stuff people actually want to watch. Whoever is approving this, I need to know who that person is so I can roast them over an open fire. Because this shit blows a cock. And not the kind of cock these two jabronis are probably into. Moving on. Before I throw up. Okay, serious question. Does John Cena seriously have no other apparel in his wardrobe at the moment? Or are we being led to believe this guy doesn't bathe? Has he worn any other article of clothing in the last 2 months except for the blue t-shirt, the jorts, and the tennis shoes? I don't even think he switched up the baseball cap. This guy has wrestled in this exact same ring gear. What's his net worth? It's like what, mid-8 figures? You're telling me this guy can't show up to work and go out before the show to buy a nice 3-piece suit? I mean, I get the gimmick with Cena is the fact that he's supposed to dress like a fruity pebble. You can't change up the color scheme occasionally? Make it look like you actually invest in clothing? How about a polo? Is that too much to ask? Well, anyway, he was out for a promo this week, being utterly useless like he always is. He just stands there and gives the hometown crowd a corporate handjob for about 10 minutes, talking about how awesome they are and how he feels the energy vibing through his veins, man. Or whatever lingo he uses to suit the narrative. It's the same fucking shit every week. And here's everything I basically got out of it before it directly led into the follow-up angle. Cena's apparently been contemplating retirement because it has been exactly 2,002 days since John Cena has won a televised singles match. The operative word there being singles match. Not tag matches. Not even premium live special matches. In that case, it's been under a month. For whatever reason, though, he's stuck on the televised singles match discussion. It's just eating away at him. Like, he doesn't care about tag matches or multi-mans or pay-per-view events or any of that stuff. All right. I don't know why this bug's crawling up his ass, but whatever. So he basically all but says, the next guy that walks through that curtain, I'm going to bury his ass Super Cena style. Just like I've done to every rising star in the last 15 to 20 years who's come to threaten my top spot. Sure enough, who should show up here but Solo Sikoa. The young, hungry lion who's looking to be the future prospect of this company. Or at least one of them. He's somebody that has potential. He could draw money for this company, hypothetically speaking. But he's got to go through Cena first. Now, if this were WWE 15 years ago, I would not put it past them for a second to have Cena smash over this guy in under a minute and then win with his finish. Turns out, it was even funnier in this case, because they start brawling for approximately 3 seconds until Jimmy Uso runs down and gives Cena one of the worst super kicks of all time. A spot that was so bad it'll probably end up being the cover page for the next Botchamania. And they proceed to put the boost to Cena until Jey Uso hits the ring under a hood and black cloak, and he attacks Jimmy. And while they're doing the pull apart with the Usos on the floor, Solo goes for the spike on Cena, and And then Cena turns it into an AA and lays him out. What was the point of this? Just to let us know that Cena's not retiring anytime soon? Okay. And you needed to tease the retirement angle on a random episode of SmackDown. Why? Beats me. Just more of the same Cena propaganda they've been pounding up my anal cavity for the last 20 years. Greatest of all time, never give up. Same old shit. So here's everything I wrote down. Well, prior to the next in-ring segment. These were all pre-tapes. Logan Paul footage of him knocking out some ham and egger named Dylan Danis. No idea. It's boxing. No one gives a shit. Logan Paul litters in the parking lot. Replay of the Cena segment we literally just saw less than 2 minutes ago. Recap of the tag title switch on Raw. Nick Aldis fines Jey Uso 10 grand for jumping the guardrail and subsequently kicks him and Adam Pearce out of the building. This is where I noted, after 1 week, Nick Aldis is already a more assertive authority figure than Adam Pearce was for his entire run as SmackDown GM. I already like him that much more. We also had Adam threaten Nick with competitive gamesmanship. So I imagine that'll play into the Survivor Series theme. And then we finally get the Logan Paul segment with Rey Mysterio. But it was actually a surprisingly good segment, even though I really didn't have much in the ways of expectations. And look, man, I've read the stories about Logan Paul's personal life. I've seen the articles. I'm not here to share my opinion of what I think about Logan's relationship choices. What I will say is that as a pro wrestler, as an active talent in WWE, I've really enjoyed the work I've seen from him. He has natural charisma, ring presence. He's a beast of an athlete, great ring shape. And, while I don't really have much of a passion for following his MMA or boxing career, the work he's done with WWE in the last few years has been really eye-opening. Kind of like the Pat McAfee thing. Logan has shown that he has an inherent gift for this profession. He gets the business. And that's why I think it's reflected positively in a lot of his programs. Yes, he does a lot of modern indie stuff that you see guys do nowadays, but it's done on a professional level. He doesn't intentionally expose the business as fraudulent. You can tell that he actually has a passion and a drive for this sport. And because he's a celebrity name, he has that mainstream appeal that brings eyeballs and intrigue to the company for more casual, everyday people, especially people that are big in the podcasting industry. Like, this guy brings publicity to the company, good or bad, but he's a natural driver, and that's good. And boy, is he a great heel. I can't state that enough. Granted, the whole confrontation with him and Ray just kind of came out of nowhere. But, with that said, the gears are turning in my head a little bit as I was watching this play out. I like the idea of what this could all lead to at Crown Jewel. Basically, you got Logan out there being a jag-off to the Texas fans. He's throwing shade at guys like Ray and Roman and LA Knight, trying to put himself over and talk about the fact that he's already figured the business out, which is always a cringe statement when older fans like me hear that stuff. When you hear young guys boast about how they get the business, more often than not, it's total bullshit. But I get what he was going for. And he eventually tries to crack the joke about the fact that he took down one deadbeat dad in a boxing match the other week. Now he has the chance to do it again to another deadbeat dad. And of course, Q-Ray, he ain't having any of that garbage. He tells Logan that he reminds him a lot of his son Dom, Good wrestler, bright future ahead of him, but boy does he have a loud mouth. But he tells Logan that if it's the U.S. title he wants, Ray will grant him that title shot at Crown Jewel. And they end up doing the slow, dramatic handshake, subsequently followed with the Mexican standoff until Logan finally left. And again, this all kind of came out of left field with very little advertisement, but they got some options to work with here. If there's ever going to be a time to split off Escobar from the LWO and have him go heel, this would be the perfect time to do it. God, can you imagine the nuclear heat reaction he would get? In Saudi Arabia, of all places? If Escobar went out there and fucked over Ray and cost him the belt, allowing Logan Paul to capture the U.S. title? Logan Paul. God, Escobar would be the second biggest heel in the company. Now, it's not to say that's their only option they could go with, but I mean, if you think about it, why else would they be doing this match? Like, Ray beating Logan Paul is kind of whatever. You don't really get much out of that. But on the other hand, if you really want to get under people's skin, God, Logan Paul is a United States champion. I think you almost have to do it, right? And think about it this way. Even if I may not agree wholly on them having to sacrifice the world title for a more secondary title, remember how I was advocating for that LA Knight Logan Paul feud right before SummerSlam this year? And instead they went with Ricochet, which is just kind of meh. That option is still on the table. If you want to do LA Knight versus Logan Paul as a big money attraction match for next year's Mania card, you throw the U.S. title into the equation, that's something that could get over like wildfire. Having LA Knight beat Logan Paul for the strap in next year's Mania in a big money attraction match, something to think about. You know, if we're thinking about long-term end goals to keep LA Knight's momentum going after the inevitable job to Roman in 2 weeks. Again, it's just hard for me to wrap my head around the idea that LA Knight is actually going to beat Roman for the belt. If anything is going to save his career after that loss, how about beating fucking Logan Paul? But I guess we'll see. I mean, first we have to actually get the strap on Logan, and we'll see if we even make it that far. It's WWE, so I never know what to expect with these people, whether or not Vince is around. So at this point, knowing what I was in for with the main event, which I'll talk about briefly in a minute, they tried to throw a buffer in there with this Grayson Fodder, Austin Theory versus Dragon Lee Cameron Grimes match. And I like Theory. I was a huge fan of Grimes' work in NXT many moons ago. Dragon Lee, I don't think we've even seen him work a regular singles match on the main roster yet, so I don't have much of an opinion on him yet. But I am so done with this fucking Grayson Waller shit. I'm done with the gimmick. I'm done with the talk segments. I'm done with just about anything and everything they're doing with this guy on TV. So I didn't watch this. I had it on in the background, but I wasn't paying attention. I came back in the room and Theory and Fodder were celebrating on the rampway, so I assume they won. How, I don't know. Nor do I really care. They need to get Theory as far away from this clown as humanly possible. Unfortunately, they seem to be insistent on furthering this tag team push for reasons that only make sense to the people booking this fucking show right now. I don't get it. I really don't. They got a future prospect in one hand, and then in the other hand, they got the equivalent of moose diarrhea. It's a total black and white scenario, and I just can't will myself to overlook the diarrhea on the team. Until they move Theory away from this and try to get him back on track as a singles guy, I just don't know how much I can stomach these segments. As long as I'm seeing him interact with this nothing happening jobber. You know, man, say what you want about Vince McMahon. He has his flaws as a booker. The one thing he got right, the singles push of Austin Theory, even though it never really went anywhere. But at least that guy was in a featured capacity when Vince was in charge. I don't know what the fuck Hunter's doing with him, but those guys must have heat, because that's the only explanation I have. But with that, speaking of people who have heat with me, well, I guess we should talk about the main event. I mean, I'm literally regurgitating the same bullet points now. And frankly, that's not my own doing. It's just a simple fact that this fucking company literally can't help themselves. They're just so sold on this fascinating, almost unhealthy belief that Charlotte Flair is the greatest female athlete of all time. And they just can't help but continually pound and ram this bullshit propaganda down our throats. Nonstop. It's been years. It's the exact same thing they do with Cena. And the only difference is one has a penis and the other has a vagina. Allegedly. I don't know about Charlotte after all that surgery. I have my suspicions. So for, I believe in counting, the 89th consecutive title match they've given this fucking blonde bimbo, for no other reason I can think of than she's Charlotte Flair, they gave her yet another fucking title match this week against Io. Even though she's done nothing to earn it, except being Ric Flair's daughter. I mean, I was already over it before they even rang the bell. But this has got to be a record for TV matches. I'm not kidding you. From the timing of the opening bell until Io rolled out to the floor as their commercial pitch spot, I believe it was approximately 15 seconds before the actual commercial cut. 15 seconds. Yet they wonder why no one gives a shit about the matches on this show. So they're doing this match. It's not really good. Charlotte fucking sucks. Everything she does always looks like it's happening in slow motion. My favorite is when she will stand there cooperatively waiting to catch a girl in her arms so she can set up a spot. Or like, she'll look up with her arms extended, making it totally obvious she's supposed to counter something or set up some big spot. It's like, could you try and make it look more choreographed? You dumb bitch. How many years have you been in this business? How much footage have you had the opportunity to look over in your entire life? My God. You know, they actually had one spot here that looked moderately cool. Then it was immediately ruined with Charlotte hitting one of the worst spears of all time because she can't do anything right. It was a spot where Io was coming down for a moonsault press. Charlotte got the knees up. Io took a hell of a bump for it. Then, of course, Charlotte immediately just ran into her with a sloppy tackle and totally killed it. And then she chased Bayley around ringside after she tried to put Io's foot under the bottom rope. And after all the distraction stuff on the floor, Io blocked a second spear attempt by using the belt on Charlotte, and she stole the pin. A mediocre match with a shit finish. And based on WWE logic, that probably means we'll be seeing Charlotte get about 17 more title shots before the end of the year. Because that 16th title win or whatever it is they're coming at, you know it's coming. It is so evident. But I guess the selling point in the meantime is let's just keep spamming multiple Charlotte Flair title matches every week on television. How long before that gets old? I've been over it since day one. So that was that. Oh yeah, and Bianca Belair returned. Yippee. The exact opposite of what needed to happen. Returning as a babyface to save Charlotte. Wouldn't you know it? The exact wrong thing to do. The one thing they needed to abstain from doing. Nope. She's just a babyface. Cool. Fantastic. I mean, to be honest, the last half hour of the show was kind of whatever. Main eventing your TV show with the girls, I mean, you're only going to get so much out of that. Even removing my own personal opinions about Charlotte as a worker, how many times have we seen this fucking match at this point? It's been done to death. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of Charlotte. I'm just sick of everything this company does with this chick from a booking standpoint. Ramming her down my throat as the greatest of all time when she's the fucking shits in the ring. Io's not really doing much for me as the champion right now. She's just kind of a cog in the wheel in this whole thing. Bianca returning at the end got a big pop, but what for? Bringing her back as a babyface. Been there, done that? Haven't we already kind of established the bloom is off the rose with that? So now we're just back to square one with her again. The only thing on the show looking back that really made it worthwhile was the confrontation with Logan Paul and the possibilities of what they could do with him as the U.S. champion. I mean, I'm actually probably looking more forward to that match than I am with Roman and LA Knight right now. I like the idea of what they could do after the fact with Logan as the champion. The kind of reaction he'll get holding a WWE title on television again. I mean, I have to imagine if they're actually going to put the U.S. strap on him, Logan's going to be sticking around for the time being. I mean, unless they're going to do the whole part-time champion deal with him again, which they could. But again, I talked about it before. The kind of publicity that guy will do for the company outside, press conferences, social media events. That guy's going to have his face plastered all over the media. There's some money to be had there. And like I talk about with LA Knight, he continues to be a hot part of the show every week, but I just don't have faith that they'll actually have him win the strap at Crown Jewel. Or that they'll follow through with his momentum after the show's over. If they're just using him as a ploy to keep the Roman title program going, it's kind of unfortunate. The popularity that guy is gaining, how over he is right now with the WWE audience, to use him as a sacrificial lamb, and that's it? Again, it wouldn't be the first time WWE's done it, which is kind of why I have the bar set so low in expectations, because if that winds up being the final blow-off, then I'm not shocked. I really wouldn't be. Unless they do swerve me and actually have him beat Roman, which really doesn't seem all that likely based on what I think the ultimate game plan is with Cody. We'll see. I'm just not that optimistic. Trust me, I've learned my lesson when it comes to WWE. Multiple times. The more jaded and cynical I am, the less it hurts when I'm evidently let down. I think that's a lesson we all need to learn collectively as fans. Certainly when it comes to this fucking company. Well then, moving along with the other portion of the Retro Monday show, we are jumping forward in the timeline to NXT from 2013. Coming off the heels of two fairly big angles from the previous show. The first ever showdown between Sami Zayn and Bo Dallas for the NXT title, which as we know ended in controversial fashion. And we also had some fallout to the tag title rematch with the Ascension versus Neville and Graves, where Graves turned on Neville, and they solidified that split. So as we go into this show, they actually dived right into the Graves-Neville story from the jump and tried to keep that program hot. Graves is at the top of the rampway giving his why Graves why explanation, and he doesn't get far before getting blindsided by Neville, with Graves coming precariously close to smashing his face off the stage lights. And, it's kind of your typical pull-apart angle where referees eventually come out to separate them. We don't really get clarification on the rationale, I guess, behind Graves' turn. Still being left up in the air. But the one thing I did mention during the angle last week, the fact that they kind of used this program to launch Adrian Neville to the title picture as they transitioned into 2014. Again, it's interesting as I go back and see how quickly a lot of this unfolded. I remember the Graves-Neville feud. I just didn't realize how quickly it all came together. All it took was one title loss, and Graves said, "Fuck this," and he stabbed his partner in the back and left him for dead. Almost on a whim. And then fast forward the following week on television, we're already getting the blow-off, essentially. Well, put an asterisk next to that because it can be argued that it's not the actual blow-off, but I'll talk about that in a minute. What do you say we talk about Emma versus Sasha Banks? Oh, goody. The highlight of which was the announcers plugging Emma's merchandise sales on her personal website. And I believe I heard them mention that one of the hotbed items being sold at the moment was a flamethrower. You know, in addition to t-shirts and other apparel. Got to make sure we plug the personalized Emma flamethrowers. Definitely something that the kids will enjoy for the holiday seasons. So this match was horrible. The best compliment I can give it was that Emma had some okay-looking arm drags. Elsewise, there was a lot of sloppy hair pulling and catfight spots. A lot of screaming. God, I forgot how much the girls used to scream down in NXT. This is great. The fans tried to start a "We Want Tables" chant before the break spot. In a straight wrestling match with Emma versus Sasha Banks. These people could not give a fuck less. We came back with Sasha applying the worst sleeper hold I've ever seen. Which is ironic because right at the point I said that to myself, Matt Bloom on commentary casually informed us that Sasha was personally trained by Lance Storm. To which I said, either Matt Bloom is lying, or Sasha did not learn how to properly apply a chicken lock sleeper hold based on Lance's training. And judging by the worker Lance Storm was when he was in his prime, I put the blame solely on Sasha. And finally, the match came to a head when Paige ran down to thwart Summer Rae's interference. And while Emma was distracted by that, Sasha rolled her up for the 3 count. At which point, we had Paige try to clothesline Sasha after the bell, but she ducked, so Paige accidentally clocked Emma. The problem there being, in order for Paige to actually perform this spot, she would have had to essentially lunge at Emma with her entire body weight to even make contact. Mostly because Emma was standing like 10 feet behind Sasha the entire time. So this was poorly executed. And that's basically all I got out of it. This is the well-renowned women's revolution movement that everybody was clamoring to see back in 2013. When the hardcore fans woke up one day and said, "Man, this NXT women's wrestling is pretty good." Well, I'm watching it. When does it become good? I mean, perhaps it was better than the stuff happening on the main roster at the time. I will grant you that. But what's that really saying at the end of the day? If this shit was better than the main roster girls at the time, what were they doing on Raw at that point? Mud wrestling? Bra and panties matches? Good God. Thankfully, they followed that clunker with a great exclusive interview with Bo Dallas. After his successful title defense 1 week ago, he is now letting us know that he is ready for a well-deserved vacation. And his destination, the so-called Bo Dallas World Tour, it will be making a pit stop in Bolivia so that he can personally deliver 10,000 squirt guns to all the starving children. What a phenomenal douchebag. I also love the line, controversy, schmontroversy. He actually said that. And it wasn't lame, because it was Bo Dallas. Truly underrated heel. So then we had the Ascension steamroll over 2 job guys in a brief squash. Didn't recognize them offhand, but I believe their names were Tits McGee and Bon Heifer Treffer. Now, the ring intros for the Ascension lasted longer than the actual match. They spent the whole time dissecting the one geek in the green trunks, and then they got their win with the Fall of Man. Just more of the continuation of the Road Warrior smash-over type booking. And they're not doing a half-bad job of it. Again, the problem with hindsight of 2020, you look back at it now and think, was it all for naught? Because where are the Ascension now 10 years after the fact? Are they even still wrestling? I don't hear much about them anymore. If they are active in the business, it's not in any mainstream capacity. It's kind of sad. You know, they had the right idea with these guys. They're decent athletes. They just never followed through with it. And by they, I mean Vince. But, well, then they showed us a quick highlight of the conclusion to the Bo-Sammy title match. That was in a little highlight package. Then we got to hear Sammy chime in on the finish during an exclusive pre-tape. And he basically acknowledged that he didn't have an issue with JBL restarting the match when Bo's feet were clearly under the bottom rope. It was the right call. But where was JBL to restart the match when Bo clearly cheated by using the exposed turnbuckle? He methodically brought up managerial conspiracy theories in WWE, saying it's a similar situation to what was happening on the main roster at the time, with everyone trying to fuck over Bryan Danielson at all costs. Now the same thing's happening to another underdog bearded lumberjack in NXT. Coincidental? Or oddly convenient? Oh, and speaking of the man, Bradshaw was in the back roasting Renee Paquette for dressing like a slut. I'm just reporting on what happened. Don't shoot the messenger. More importantly, he roasted Sami Zayn for accusing JBL and the rest of WWE management for conspiring to screw him out of the NXT title. And I got to admit, JBL was very good at playing the corporate suck-up. The company businessman, for lack of better terms. He basically told everyone, without saying the obvious, that Zayn was being suspended until further notice. He didn't actually refer to it as a suspension per se. He just quietly acknowledged that he would be left off of TV until Zayn apologizes for his actions. It was Well, it was definitely a Bradshaw promo. Whatever you think of the guy, good opinion or bad opinion, on or off camera, he was a fucking great villain. Not the kind of guy you want to mess with. You know who else was the kind of guy you wouldn't want to mess with? It was Rusev. He more or less killed a guy this week in the form of CJ Parker. Oh, this poor fucker. He got the job guy treatment and then some. Funny enough, it appears they've already dropped the makeshift tag team with him and Dax. He came out by himself this week, and he beat Parker with the accolade in about a minute. An absolute decimation. And, well, like I said, Dax didn't come out with Rusev this time. But you know who did come out at the very end here? Was Rusev's future soon-to-be hot, flexible wife, Lana. Yes, I believe the first on-screen appearance for Lana, the mouthpiece of the Bulgarian Brute, the woman responsible for helping Rusev gain as much main roster traction as he did. Boy, were those two a cohesive unit. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, surely this must have been a riveting segment. Lana was really good in her role. Rusev was great in his role. So what happened? Well, here was the extent of her debut. She walked down to the ring mid-match in a very revealing red dress. The cameramen were very careful to not directly film her ass the entire time, although the tendency was there. She did one full lap around ringside. Then she walked up the aisleway and Rusev followed. That was it. That was her entire involvement. And I said, well, she immediately won me over. I had no memory of how Lana debuted in the WWE. I always remember her promo introductions on Raw with the fake Russian accent, but I totally forgot about this. Now, of course, nobody knew who she was. They just saw a hot blonde in a skimpy outfit, and all the horny dudes in the crowd popped wood. It was just kind of amusing to see her casually walk down to the ring and then back up the ramp in a matter of seconds. She didn't even stop. She just kept walking. I mean, the announcers are somewhat trying to draw attention to it, but they're just as clueless as everybody else is. I mean, I'm just laughing because I know where it all goes. Something that was probably such an underwhelming reveal in 2013 turned out to be one of the hottest main roster acts during the entirety of the mid-2010s. To be continued on this. And then that took us to the Corey Graves Adrian Neville match. 2 weeks ago, these guys were a totally functioning, cohesive unit. Then Graves turned on Neville the following week because they lost their title rematch. Now, 7 days after that, they are now having the supposed blow-off/grudge match in the main event of NXT. Now as bitter rivals. No one's got to cut a promo yet. Graves has not explained his actions. Neville's not commented on the subject. They're just having the match. Some may call this rushed, perhaps even hot-shotted. It is very hard to dispute that notion. And for what it was fine. Didn't go all that long. I don't really know if all the acrobatics from Neville were needed here. And what was supposed to be a heated grudge match. Like, I always kind of shake my head when I see two guys in a blood feud doing aerial stunts. That's one of those modern wrestling things that always gets under my skin. Like, even going back to this period in the business when a lot of the indie stuff became a little more mainstream. I mean, it was toned down in NXT, but you still saw bits and pieces of that stuff. I think the problem for me is it's the suspension of disbelief factor. Like, am I really supposed to buy these guys hate each other when I'm seeing them do flip dives onto one another? Is that something that would ever happen in real life? I know I'm old and crusty, but I mean, these are the kinds of things that I think of when I see that stuff. They didn't overdo it with the high spots, thankfully. I mean, the announcers spend most of the match trying to compare Corey Graves to a James Bond villain. And I can assure you 100%, Corey Graves was anything but a James Bond supervillain. Not even in the same stratosphere. Because that would imply that Corey Graves was in any way cool. And Graves was far from cool. By every sense of the word. Now, with that said, I much prefer heel Corey Graves over babyface Corey Graves. He was a solid bad guy. Working over Neville's previously injured leg. That kind of tied in with the angle from the title match the other week where Neville tweaked his ankle on the landing when he started favoring the knee. Plus, it ended up factoring into the finish here. Neville tried to go high risk, but he came down and tweaked the leg again. So Graves chop blocked him from behind, and then he submitted Neville clean with a modified figure 4. Okay. Not really a surprising finish. I mean, I think you had to kind of put Corey over in the first match. I mean, if you had Neville win here, you don't really have any logical reason to continue the program. Plus, when you factor in that Bo is still wrapped up in the Sami Zayn story right now, it seems a bit early to throw Neville into the title mix. So I was okay with this. Still never really thought all that highly of Corey Graves as a wrestler. But, for what they were doing here in the program, it all made sense. Not what you would call a memorable classic, but it served its purpose. And you probably noticed over the last couple weeks as we're doing these NXT reviews, they've been a little shorter, a little more concise. I mean, to be honest with you, there's really not a whole lot to say about it. They're hour-long shows, a lot of squashes, a couple promos. We kind of have a general sense of the main storylines at this point. I guess you would kind of call this one a buffer/reboot episode, coming off the heels of last week's show. This is more about resetting the playing field. They didn't really blow the roof off with any big angles or matches, but that's fine. We had story continuation, and that's all that matters. It's kind of like what I talk about with the Mid-South reviews. Not every show needs to be a home run. Sometimes having those buffer shows in between, they can be good. Because it doesn't leave them with the natural tendency to try to hotshot things every week. You don't need to do all that. I like the ebb and flow. It means when you actually get a big fight feel show, it has more value. You have something to look forward to. Last week we had the Bo-Sammy title match, which was really good. We had the split off with Graves and Neville, which was fine. Here it was just kind of moving the chess pieces along, and that's perfectly all right. So, we're just marching forward in the timeline here. We still have not reached the peak levels of NXT yet in the Full Sail era, I guess you could say, but we're getting there. Slowly by surely, you can see the progress continuing. But as we wrap things up here for the Monday show, appreciate everybody coming back to check it out. I'll kind of go over what I said before. You make sure you comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I guess I'll catch you guys on the flip side, as I'm getting distracted now because I'm receiving emails and text messages from all my work teachers. That's fine. Alrighty. Thank you. Take care. Have a good one. Peace out.